Okay, what's up, everybody? I think we're ready to rock here. Um, just getting some stuff ironed out before we get started. See a couple folks in the chat already. I figured what we would do is I've got myself all tangled up here. I figured what we do is we would do a quick live stream impressions of the Thieaudio Monarch MKII, and then I'll do just a general Q&A, and you could ask whatever questions about anything. But for the first little bit, I just want to focus on the Thieaudio Monarch MKII. Let me know how the audio levels are and everything, and making sure everything is looking sharp. For anybody who's not aware, I'm back from vacation. I took a 2-week vacation in France. It's actually kind of convenient because I was initially a little bit worried about the pandemic and whatnot and traveling and stuff like that. And while I was there, things were getting kind of crazy in Europe with this stuff. But thankfully, it never actually hit that craziness didn't take place where I was. So it was very smooth and just generally good trip. So yeah. And actually, so the reason why I was there initially was because I got invited to go visit the Focal factory, which was pretty awesome. So we did a factory tour to check out where they make their drivers, how they make their drivers, and also their speaker cabinets. So and it wasn't just me. There was a couple of folks there from, because a lot of folks from the speaker world are very familiar with that brand as well. So they were kind enough to show us around and give us a tour of the factory. So I'll be hopefully working on a bit of a wrap up video on that, because that was pretty awesome. But yeah, so I obviously haven't been able to produce any videos in the last couple of weeks, so it's felt like I've been on hiatus, I guess. And thankfully, Chrono was able to kind of fill in there, and he knocked it out of the park with the latest videos, especially the lyric review. So definitely check that out if you haven't already, if you're curious about that headphone. But yeah, guys, let me know, is the sound okay? I look refreshed. I look like I gained 20 pounds. The food there is amazing. So yeah, it's also like where I was much nicer weather than it is here in Vancouver right now. So yeah. Hey Rob, how's it going? Hope your folks are doing okay after all the bad weather. Did you have a good holiday? Yes. And yes, my folks are okay. There was a crazy landslide or mud, or there was a landslide, but then also they called it an atmospheric river where I live, near where I live, that wiped out all the highways going in and out of Vancouver. So I think that right now some of the interior folks are kind of struggling a bit because there's no you go to the grocery store and there's nothing much there because the trucks haven't been able to go in, right? So, but where I am, it's fine. But yeah, let's without any further ado, let's get into the Thieaudio Monarch MKII. I see Metal 571 in the chat saying keybs out. We're chatting about keyboards earlier, and we will get more into it. And somebody's asking already, will there be a top headphone pick for 2021? So I've actually already written a 2021 buying guide that's kind of broken down by price. And it's up on headphones.com already, if you guys are curious about that. That's just for the open backs for now. I'm still working on a closed back one. But, okay, so Thieaudio Monarch MKII. This is the case that it comes in, and this is the case for the original. So it's the one thing with the case for the original, as much as it's nice that it's small and pocketable, it's really thin, and sometimes it can actually be a little tricky to get the IEMs in the case, especially because they do come with the adapters on the ends, which I don't seem to have here at the moment. It's probably already in here. Yeah. these thick boy adapters, right? So they've moved to this case, which is probably my favorite of all of their cases, because they actually had other cases, I believe, as well. So this one, I hope they continue doing this case. It's not pocketable, of course, but at the same time, it's got lots of room, and kind of makes sense because they've switched the adapters to be these ones here. Now, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that these connectors, these like terminated pieces, it's either Nutric or the other brand, and I can't remember what it is. So someone can let me know what the brand is for these, but apparently they are of the nicer quality than just sort of generic ones, and they certainly look and feel that way. The downside is that these are also still a little bit on the large side, but they feel really sturdy. And if you're wondering, it's not the same system for attaching the ends, right? This is the original cable, and it was terminated in 2.5, and then you would just sort of attach the end pieces on. With these, it's a little different. Let's see if I can actually do this. Yeah, these have the 4-pin style. So, I'm not sure you can see that, right? And so I like it better because it means that you don't have to stack terminations on top of one another. So that's really nice. And then there's a little notch in there. You gotta line it up, and then it fits. Now, let me just actually show you guys the IEM. It's right here as I tangle it all up. I actually really like the cable too, and I'll get to that in a second. But this is the Thieaudio Monarch MKII. You can see it looks kind of like charred flesh. No, it looks like molten lava. I think that's what they're going for. Not the extra crispy burnt skin look. But in any case, the cable is also very different. I'll get on the size comparison between this and the original in a second, but focus there. So the cable on the original was this slightly large and unwieldy thing. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't my favorite cable. And this is the new one, which I like a lot better. Not only does it look a lot better, but it also, I find it a little bit more ergonomic and functional. Let's see if you guys can focus. Yes. All right. And then you also get the Y splitter here, which is the same style as the terminations as well. And then this little piece. Right. So that's the IEMs, the physical look and shape of the IEMs. And then I want to show you guys a size comparison here between the two. First, actually, let me just show you. This is the original Monarch. And this was a pretty big, chunky boy IEM, like really substantial, and you could kind of feel it a little bit. It wasn't, at least for me, it's not terribly uncomfortable, but at the same time, it's not. It was something that after a while I would notice that it was there, and it would be a little bit bulbous, and that's partially because this section right here sticks out. I'm not sure you guys can see this fully, but it protrudes quite strongly, and I would feel this bottom little protruding section coming through. Now on the Monarch MKII, it doesn't have that bottom section, right? It's just all perfectly smooth on the bottom. So for me, it's not like massively smaller. It's just a little smaller, right? Let's see if I can get this with the same size. Right? This might reveal it. Do you see how on this one it kind of juts out at the end, and on this one it's smooth all the way across? So that's, for me, it's a win. I consider the Monarch MKII to be actually one of the more comfortable IEMs. It's not like SA6 level comfortable, but it's like up there, and definitely more comfortable than the Symphonium Helios. So, pretty awesome. Have you talked about Monarch yet, Monk? I don't know what that means. I'm talking about it now. Is that the Aeon Noir? No, this is the Aeon closed X. Aeon X closed. There's a video on the open and closed Aeon X is coming out soon. Anyways, that's the look and feel out of the way for the Monarch Mark II. Very, very comfortable, and while I didn't have a huge issue with the original, the Monarch Mark II is definitely more comfortable for me. And so for people who did have issues with the physical size and shape of the original, I think you're going to have much easier time with the Monarch Mark II. Come on, focus. This camera's taking its sweet time. Only because this is in the way. Yeah, that's definitely why. Damn it. All right. Need this. So, is this working? It's like the eye detection is like not wanting to hang out. Okay, so as far as the sound quality goes, let me just actually pull up the graphs here. There we go. So this is the channel matching, channel balance. Now, I'm not going to show this in relation to the original Monarch because I think the one that we have, it actually measures a little better in certain areas than the ones that other people are getting, because this was like a really early unit. And I think they made some changes to that unit. So, but as far as the rest of the stuff, I can talk about that. So the frequency response here is very, very good on the Monarch Mark II. And so you have a similar kind of sub bass shelf here, very distinct and prominent sub bass presence to it. It's not quite as bassy in general as the original Monarch, but it's pretty close. And then I find that the transition between the bass and mids to be a little bit cleaner sounding. Now again, this is where this particular original Monarch that I've got here, it actually has a lot more mid and upper bass than the ones that I think that most people were getting. Like Crin's was a bit different there from the one that we got. So compared to this particular original Monarch, the Monarch Mark II, it's just less thick in the bass and in the lower registers, but at the same time, I think compared to most original Monarchs, it's going to be pretty similar there for the overall balance. Maybe not quite as bassy, but pretty darn close. Looks less lean, which is good. Yeah, exactly. So I think the original, like not the one that we have, but like the one that most people have, is a little leaner there for the original Monarch. So then, as far as the rest of the tuning is concerned, this is just one of the best tuned IEMs, like, period. Like, I think it's just straightforward excellent. However, I do also think there's a couple things worth mentioning and highlighting. One of them is that the ear gain region, or like the area where the ear canal is amplifying certain frequencies, upper mids, it's a bit strong. It's strong to the point of being tonally correct, in my opinion, but at the same time, that means that for certain genres, it's going to be a little unforgiving. And that's kind of how I would describe it. Like, it's a little bit more on the analytic, clarity focused side of things, rather than the sort of like laid back, smooth kind of thing, which I personally really enjoy, like tunings like the SA6, Dunu SA6 and the 64 Audio U12T and stuff like that. But if you're looking for a more, let's say, tonally correct in the analytic sense for serious audiophile music, then something like the Monarch Mark II would be the way to go. It's just, a little bit less forgiving for, crap recordings. And then the other thing that I noticed even before measuring and before looking at measurements or anything like this, and I even mentioned this to a couple of folks when I first heard this, was that this 5K forwardness is noticeable. I heard it like almost right away. But the thing is, it's not a peak necessarily. I mean, it's a bump a little bit, but like the thing to keep in mind is that because this coupler I'm using is the Gross RIO 402 coupler, it doesn't have the coupler resonance at around like 8K. So there is actually more treble energy here than what this shows, because there is some damping going on to make it so that resonance is gone, and it just sort of like kind of removes a lot of the treble presence in this region. So it's more balanced here for the mid treble, lower and mid treble, than I think this looks, meaning that this 5K bump, yes, it's noticeable, but it's more of just like a general 5K forwardness rather than any fatiguing kind of like peak that would cause, percussion compression issues and stuff like that. The other thing to note is that this does have really good treble extension, which is great. For whatever reason, when I'm tip rolling on these, some tips I hear like a pronounced elevation around 10K. I know this looks like 11K, but like somewhere in the between 9 and 11K, with certain tips, I hear kind of like like an extra kind of like ringing there at around 10K. So if you hear that, it's worth playing around with different tips. And so right now I'm using just some random silicon ones. I'm not sure if these are spin fits, but they have the red on them. And these ones don't seem to have that for me. And similarly, some Dakoni foam ones that I was using didn't have it, but a lot of the other tips did. So that I think it's worth messing around with in general. And then, basically, apart from that, this is a neutral, slightly analytic, slightly clarity-focused tuning with a bass boost. And that means that for the genres that I like the most, like jazz and classical and acoustic, it's going to be exceptionally good. Someone's saying SA6 is quite relaxed, not ideal personally. Yeah, exactly. So if you find the SA6 to be too relaxed, the Monarch Mark II, this kind of tuning, I think, is what you'd be looking for. It's just that personally, like if I'm listening to something with electric guitars, which I was actually testing earlier, I'd probably want like maybe 1 to 2 dB less upper mid, like less ear gain in general. But apart from that, this overall tuning is really quite good for piano recordings, like piano tracks, and female vocals come through quite nicely here again. So for me, if I'm listening to my jazz tracks, that a lot of it's like piano recordings with female vocals, it's very, very good there. So this is definitely one of the best tunings that I've come across under $1,000, if not the best tuning that I've come across for serious audiophile music, even if it's a little bit on the unforgiving side for the kind of recordings that Metal 571 likes. No, just kidding. Even if it's a bit unforgiving for some of the other, let's say, crap music that I like to listen to as well. Now, the interesting thing about this, I'll get to some of the technical stuff in a second, but I just want to compare the tuning here to that of the Symphonium Helios, because that's the other IEM that I think a lot of folks are wanting a comparison with. Oops, that's too much. Let's zoom to fit. Is that right? Okay. So I want to just kind of give a comparison here, so you guys are aware of how they sound respective to one another. But I'm going to leave the full review to Precog Vision, because I'm going to send this down to him. He actually owns the Helios, so he can do that side by side. But as far as the tuning is concerned, the Helios actually has an even more distinct sub-bass shelf. So what I mean by that is it's a little bit leaner in the transition between the bass and the lower mids. So it's almost like, I think somebody else mentioned as well, that it has this sort of like sub-bass kind of, like subwoofer kind of character to it, where there's no bleed whatsoever between the bass and the mids on the Helios. And so if you found that to be like a little bit lean, because, and I keep saying it, this is something that with the Helios, it's going to sound great for recordings that fully token the sub-bass frequencies, but for recordings that don't, like say classic rock and metal, it's going to sound pretty lean, right? So if you found that transition to be a little too lean, then the Monarch Mark II would probably be the way to go. But even still, I know a lot of folks who, because they're not listening to recordings that fully token the lowest frequencies, will say, I'd prefer the SA6 kind of tuning as well, because I think the SA6 is even a little bit more, present there, I guess. I'd have to look at the graphs because I can't remember exactly, but I feel like the SA6 does have a little bit more presence there. Or it's less distinct. But for me, when I'm listening to the jazz tracks that have the upright double bass and they go all the way down, they don't just sort of bottom out there at 100 hertz. You get the full impact with both the Helios and the Monarch. But that's just something to note. And then for the upper mids and treble, the Monarch is a bit more analytic and forward in the upper mids. and to me, where the Helios's upper mids are, that's about where I would want it. Like just a little bit more relaxed for electric guitars and stuff like that. And then the treble is pretty similar between the two, but actually the lower treble and mid treble is a little more forward on the Helios, whereas the upper treble, like the 10K stuff, is a little more forward on the Monarch. I could go either way on this. I don't like, to me, it's like the Monarch has that sort of extra sense of like, not like shimmer like some planar magnetics have like for over-ear headphones, but like just a little bit of extra brilliance up top. That's sort of how I would describe it. I think Chrono calls this a kind of glisten, which is, yeah, fair enough. All right, this needs to, like, for whatever reason that camera's focusing on the microphone. Gotta get that out of the frame. Can you guys still hear me? So anyways, that's the difference between the two. And in both cases, I think the treble is really quite good. It's just that, and in particular with the Monarch Mark II, it does a better job of the mid treble, in my opinion, than the original Monarch, which I found I had to, again, tip roll a little bit to get the mid treble to be as smooth as I want it to be. And with the Monarch Mark II, I have a much easier time doing that. So very good on that front. And the Helios also is really good in the treble. It's just a little bit more forward and focused in the mid treble. That's how I'm going to describe that. And of course, the Helios has that crazy upper treble extension as well that a lot of people like. So yeah, to me, they're both good tunings. I would say that the key differentiator, though, is this upper mid-range section where you have more ear gain on the Monarch Mark II and you have less on the Symphonian Helios. So if you find like if you don't want anything to be shouty, like if you're worried about that and sensitive to the upper mid-range frequencies, then you would probably want to gravitate to the Helios. But if you listen to good stuff, the Monarch Mark II is like, it's on the right side of shouty. It's not too shouty. And I think if it were like 2 dB more, it would be shouty. That's kind of how I hear it, like 1 to 2 dB more. So it's like, it's just on the right edge of that, meaning that it's got all the clarity that you would want without having that super fatiguing character to it. Again, especially if you listen to serious audiophile music. Electric guitars probably won't sound so pleasant on that one. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, they sound balanced, but they don't sound like they don't sound fun, if that makes sense. Like they're not fatiguing. It's just that they're not like yeah, like I was listening to again, don't judge me for my music taste here, but I was listening to Killswitch Engage, the first album that they did, Alive or Just Breathing. I think that's the first one, just because I wanted to hear how some older, electric guitar tone would sound on these. And while it wasn't like fatiguing or anything like that, it also didn't have, it was also like to the point where I was like, well, I probably would gravitate to something else, maybe even the Helios or something like that, for that type of music. But then when I go to, my jazz tracks like Diana Krall and stuff like that, the Monarch Mark II is outstanding. All right, so that's got the tuning stuff out of the way. Let me just get rid of this. Let's talk about the technical performance and stuff like that. I think the biggest thing for me, when I was comparing them side by side, and I was also comparing them to this is the Moondrop Variations right here. Let's see if I can get this going. This is Moondrop Variations. I was comparing it to that one as well. And I found that the technical performance on the Monarch Mark II is slightly better than, again, this particular original Monarch. Now, to me, it's not a massive improvement. I'd say the biggest improvement is in the bass for me. But the thing is, it's difficult to tell if that improvement is due to the fact that this particular Monarch Mark II is a little cleaner in the bass than our original one, which was a little bit just like thick. And if all of the other original Monarch, maybe they'd be even a little bit closer to this. So it could be because of the tuning differences that I'm hearing here, but it could also be because of a difference in what they did with the configuration. So for me, yeah, the Monarch Mark II is, I mean, the original was already an excellent performer there, and the Mark II, I find it to be just a little bit better, especially for the lower tones. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. You said we need to review the M9. I heard it, and yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I would say at around this price, still the most detailed IEM that I've heard is probably the Moondrop S8, but the S8 is super shouty. Like, I can't listen to that for... I know it works really well for certain genres, but for me, it's just like... The Moondrop S8 is on the wrong side of shout for me. But it is very, very detailed. I'll give it that. But yeah, so for the Monarch Mark II, I would put it pretty close in that ballpark. It's definitely worth the kilobuck price tag as far as the competitive landscape there. Compared to the Helios, though, I think again the Monarch Mark II versus the Helios is the comparison I think most people are going to want, and I'll leave that up to Precog Vision to do or to compare because he has both. Well, he will have both of them there, but for me, the biggest difference, there's two key differences. One is that the Helios, to me, as much as the Monarch Mark II is very well controlled and has good separation, and yeah, good control during busy passages, the Helios still has a more enveloping sense of soundstage and like depth. I don't know how else to describe that. And compared to the Monarch Mark II, but the Monarch Mark II has a dynamic driver in the bass, and you do notice that difference. As much as the Helios is great for that quality, it's a very punchy sounding bass for multi-BA. I do still think that dynamic driver in the bass has that kind of, I don't know, sense of impact that a lot of people like, myself included. So I think those are the two differences, and I think it just depends on what you index harder for. As far as the actual like resolution, yeah, I mean they're both good. But I'm gonna have to leave that comparison up to Precog because he's gonna be able to side by side compare them. The other key thing with the Monarch Mark II against the Helios that would actually make it so that I would prefer, I would end up choosing the Monarch Mark II in general. It's because the Monarch Mark II is it's a much easier fit for me. The nozzle's not as like massive and thick. I mean, it's not small, but it's not as long. So it doesn't it sits in my ear a little bit better than the Helios, whereas the Helios has this somewhat awkward fit that some people have no problem with, but for me it's definitely a little bit too awkward. So I would end up choosing the Monarch Mark II. Anyways, that's basically everything I wanted to say about the Monarch Mark II. Is it worth the asking price? Yes, absolutely. I would take the Monarch Mark II over the Campfire Andromeda. I would take the Monarch Mark II over the Unique Melody Mest. Someone was asking that. But it depends on the tuning, because the Mest is also very impressive for its technical performance, for its detail. I think the big question here is whether or not the Monarch Mark II is the S plus and S ranking that Kryn said it at, or whether or not I agree. And for me, I can see why he put it there. I can understand why he treats it that way. I would not have it as quite as high, because I do still think that there is some distance between the Monarch Mark II for technical performance and the Thieaudio U12T, which I find to be a little more detailed. Not much, and it's actually remarkable how close the Monarch Mark II gets, but I still think there's a little bit of distance there between, the upper flagships like the U12T and the Odin, compared to the kilobuck stuff like the Monarch Mark II. As far as the tonal balance is concerned, again, for me, the Monarch Mark II is like S tier at best, only because I think if I could have my ideal tuning, it would be maybe like 1.5 dB less between like at around 3K, and then maybe like 2 dB less with a narrower Q at around 5K. And then apart from that, we're there, right? So I would say it's excellent for its tuning. It's just not the best that I can think of. So yeah, that's kind of how I would place it. Very very good, very competitive, and very high value, especially because you get really high quality connectors. It's comfortable. You get good accessories. The case is nice. The cable's nice. So to me, it's like, this is kind of like what a $1,000 IEM should be, at least, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that's more expensive, or even around that price, and you just think like, what? Like, how is that even remotely competitive? When you listen to something like this, like the Monarch Mark II. So yeah, for me, it's definitely one of the best for value. Crane put it literally number one of all IEMs, the Monarch Mark II, or what? I wouldn't. Yeah, U12T is still the GOAT. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. For me, the U12T is also still the GOAT. So, okay, let me dive into some questions here. I see a number of folks already asking. I've heard the M9. Like, it's good. I just think that the tuning is a bit like, it's not bad actually. It's just like not my favorite. Yeah, I definitely want to try the S8, and Super loves it, but shoutiness makes sense there. Yeah, it's just like, that's the thing, is it's super detailed, but it's just too shouty. I think like that, and that's the thing. Like, if you look at this here, right? So the frequencies between like basically the ear gain stuff, right? Or like between 2K and 6K. That's generally going to be the biggest point of contention, because I think a lot of that's going to depend on the person's ear canal. Like, I know that like theoretically there should be quite a bit more agreement there, but I noticed like there is, when it comes to IEMs, like it's way more different as far as people's impressions are concerned. And then I've talked to Corinne about that before, and his explanation is that you have to, I can't remember exactly what it was that he said, but it was something along the lines of like, manufacturers have to take more into consideration. They have to assume more, whereas when we're listening to over-ear headphones, there's more of your own personal gain factors that are interacting with the sound. Yeah, I think that this region is always going to be like the overall level is always going to be a point of or it's going to be a question mark, I think, because so much of that is going to depend on the person. How's the comfort? Yeah, very, very good on the Monarch Mark II. That's the biggest improvement. I think that the sound quality improvement is there, but for me personally, the comfort improvements are key. And yeah, it's definitely, they took the feedback there. Let's see. Great to hear. Bass heads on Headphi were whinging about lack of slam on Mark II versus OG. No. It's fine. Again, I think that the big thing there is that depending on depending on whether or not the OG that I have here is representative, like the OG that I have here just has more thicker bass, because it doesn't have the kind of lean qualities, like that sort of like leaner upper bass cutout, I guess, that you saw on like the graphs from Crin. So maybe other people had tunings that were like that as well for theirs. And the Mark II is definitely more normal in that sense, but it's I would say that actually the bass detail is better on the Mark II. That's just my sense. Yeah, but again, that could be because it's not as thick, right? How about Unique Melody Mesh Mark II? I haven't heard that one. Let's see. How is it against the 64 Audio Trio? Good question. I like the tuning better on the Monarch Mark II. For the technical qualities, I think there is a sense of, I don't know, there is a really good sense of, I don't know, slam on the Trio. I haven't actually compared them side by side, so it's going from memory there. I'm going to put it to you this way. Trio is the more fun, whereas the Monarch Mark II is the more referencey kind of sound, if that makes sense. At the same time, it still has the bass boost, right? So it's like referencey with the bass boost on the Monarch Mark II, whereas the Trio is like a little more V-shape-ish, but both have really good technical performance there. As far as the value is concerned, I think you get better value out of the Monarch Mark II. But yeah. Let's see. You agree about the SA6 being warm leaning, but I tend to personally like the safe tunings, which makes me want to own an M9. Yeah, I mean, I liked the M9, but to me it was like, would I get the M9 over the Monarch Mark II? Probably not. And it's like, I would probably take the Helios over the M9 as well. M9 for me was kind of closer to like a less offensive S8, which is still very good. Like less offensive in the sense that it's like the shoutiness. I shouldn't describe the S8 like that because I know there's a lot of people who love that IEM, but for me the S8's like, yeah, every time I listen to it, I don't understand like how people are okay with that shout. But I know Precog likes it a lot, and I know Super likes it a lot, so I might be in the minority there. But to me, yeah, the M9 has similar strengths, if that makes sense, as far as the technical performance. But I would still, yeah, prefer the Monarch Mark II. Let's see. If we're talking about the value, just look at the price tag of the Andromeda and compare to the Monarch Mark II. Yeah, for me, I would definitely take the Monarch Mark II over the Andromeda. Greg, what's up? Thank you. I see your question there. What are your thoughts on amps and sound Agartha and 300B amps in general? I heard the Agartha at CanJam, but that's show conditions. I thought it sounded great, but apart from that, I'm not the right person to ask about that. I think you should ask Grover about that because he has way more experience with that stuff than I do. But I liked it a lot when I heard it. I listened to the ZMF Verite Closed off of the Agartha, and that was one of the better experiences at the show. I think the bigger thing though, because like I was listening to the Nautilus right next to it, so for me the bigger, I guess more fun experience was with the Nautilus, but that's also like ridiculously expensive, right? So that's for like endgame tube lovers. Variations versus Monarch Mark II. Okay, and that's kind of fun as well. I don't actually have the graph of the variations here, but for me, the biggest difference is in the detail, like the technical performance. Like the Monarch sounds like it had, as much as the variations is excellent there, the Monarch, like when I was comparing them side by side, I was like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Like to go, like the price increase there for the Monarch Mark II, as much as like, there's diminishing returns with all this stuff, it made sense to me that, that distance in price existed. With the variations, you do have really, really nice sub bass, like it's quite strong, dare I say, more prominent than on the Monarch Mark II. I have to look at the graphs, but just from like comparing them side by side. But yeah, it's good tuning on the variations as well. But I do think that it's just like a step up as far as the technical performance goes on the Monarch Mark II. Let's see. You can say boring for M9. No, I don't think the M9's boring. I mean, it's not. I get what you're saying. I get what Metal's saying about like if you hear something that sounds like initially you're like, that's kind of boring, but then you realize that like, oh, what that's actually good because it means there's nothing offensive going on. Yeah, I get that. All right, Odin or Monarch Mark II. Oh, did I already answer that? Yeah, actually, so the in some ways, this is a more apt comparison than the Monarch Mark II against the 64 Audio U12T, because in both cases, you have a more analytic focused presentation. And in both cases, you have similar driver types, right? So I do think that the Odin is just straight up more detailed. In the except in the treble, where I'm not as bothered by that E-stat kind of limpness that because you get it in other IEMs as well. It's not uncommon. It's just sort of like a lacking of grip and tactility there in the upper registers. But I'm not at all as bothered by that as other people are. But for the rest of the frequency response, the Odin is definitely like it's one of the most detailed IEMs that I've heard. So. Yeah, and the separation and all that stuff is outstanding on it. Good soundstage as well, like layering, depth, all that stuff. And so, in some ways, I kind of like see the Monarch Mark II as like a better value Odin, because the Odin's price tag is just like crazy. Also, on the Monarch Mark II, you have a little bit more emphasis towards the sub bass, a little more. But on the Odin, the quality is very good for the bass. Let's see, what else? Is it worth double the price of the variation? I mean, like, is anything worth double the price of anything in audio? Because that, like, it's like, diminishing returns are real. So no, obviously not. But as far as it being more expensive by a certain, margin, absolutely it makes sense. I don't really see the point of using IEMs on desktop setup. Hopefully the Mark II is drivable by my phone Xperia. Yeah, I mean, it's not, you don't need an like a power to run it. It's fine. For stuff like rock and metal, would you still say the SA6 is better even with less impressive technical performance? Personally, yes. Yeah, I really enjoy the SA6 for those genres more, because it's like the technical performance is important, but it's not more important than tonal balance in my view. And they're both good. It's just like one is maybe a little more forgiving than the other. And it probably depends. Like if you're listening to like certain recordings, like rock and metal recordings that are actually really good, then maybe there is you're not going to be as fatigued by that. But there's definitely a lot of stuff in those genres that's just like, what? Let's see. Better bass than the Z1R? I don't think so. I have both OG Monarch and Monarch II. I'd say the Monarch Mark II Slam is even better than OG. It kicks harder, but only in the sub bass region. You've got to be listening to music with sub bass, though. Exactly, right? Resolution's got it. Like that's kind of how I hear it as well. You need, like, if you're not listening to music that fully tones the sub bass frequencies, you might not even notice the difference. Yeah. Have you touched on Soundstage and Imaging, or is it not worth talking about those in IEM? So, like, I know that there are some positions out there that are like, there's no point in talking about Soundstage and Imaging in IEMs because it's all in your head anyways. And sure, okay. But there is definitely a difference between good and bad. Like, I listened to some IEMs, like let me just disclaimer here. I really do like the single dynamic driver Moondrop IEMs, but they do not do well for soundstage. Like, categorically, they are not good soundstage IEMs. In fact, I think a lot of single dynamic driver IEMs, that's not their strength. But but in particular, I notice it on like the KXXS and the Starfield and stuff, and stuff like that, where it's a very odd kind of like in your head experience for Soundstage. And then compare that to, I mean, I'm not even remotely close to the same price range, but compare that to something like a Legend X or something, one of those ridiculous Empire Ears ones, or Symphonium Helios, Campfire Andromeda 2020. It's like this difference exists. This difference is meaningful. But I do share the, I guess, thought that it doesn't matter that much, because once you're at a certain point, the differences aren't huge, right? So again, when I say, the Helios has a more enveloping sense of soundstage and space and layering than the Monarch Mark II, that's not like saying one is an HD 100S and the other one is an HD 650. So like the differences are smaller. That's, if that makes sense. How does it compare to the Andromeda 2020? Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think it's a better tuning on the Monarch Mark II, and better bass as well on the Monarch Mark II. The Andromeda 2020 is still good for detail and layering and soundstage, though. So it depends on what you are focused on. But it's not. But I would actually say, there's no scenario where I would take the Andro 2020 over the Monarch Mark II. So that's just my preference there. Okay. Let's see. I think that's basically it for my impressions of the Monarch Mark II. Without looking at the price, do you have any IEM that you would take instead of the Monarch Mark II? Yeah, so the 64 Audio U12T, the Empire Ears Odin, it's funny, like for me there's like a bit of a gap there between the Kilobook stuff and the $2,000 range. Just trying to think what else. Like if it's me personally buying an IEM, I do think it's worth looking at some of the other 64 Audio stuff that's within that range. I don't know if I would like, so for example, I really like the U6T's like technical qualities, but at the same time I prefer the Monarch Mark II's tuning, if that makes sense. So there are a few IEMs that I would take over the Monarch Mark II for sure, but at around this price, that gets very difficult. At around the Kilobuck range, it gets difficult. Yeah, so it's probably my favorite under $1,000. It gets more difficult when you get up to the 11. You're talking about like the $1,100 stuff, and that's where the Helios comes in. And like for me, I would pick the Monarch Mark II because the fit and form factor works better for my ear. But if you find that the Helios is, I guess it's hard to know before you buy, but like if you don't have any issues with like longer nozzles, then the Helios might be fine. The IEM FOMO. It's it's like that with everything though. It's not just like these ones. It's like a new thing comes out and it's like, this is the best thing ever. I'm guilty of that too. Like, because it's like, I get it, because it's like when you hear something new and you're excited about it, you want to tell people and you want to, like, that excitement kind of shows, and then that creates these hype trains. And so I'm doing my best to not, I don't know, like I'm doing my best to like get people to be patient with the stuff and kind of hedge against some of that, because you want to make sure that it's a considered purchase, not just like, the flavor of the month. But for me, the Monarch Mark II, it's probably the Kilobuck IEM to beat. That's, so I know I'm not doing it. I'm not helping out for anybody who's like on the fence and is worried about hype trains. But I'd say the hype train is real on the Monarch Mark II. It's just that I also don't rate it quite as highly as Kryn does, if that makes sense. Rob says, send precog to France. Yeah, maybe on the next trip we go. I don't know if we'll go to France again, but on the next trip we do. Also, like, depends on what's going on with the world, right? Um, if anything, I'd almost want us to do like a meetup if we can, like a reviewer meetup somewhere in North America. Um, but yeah. All right, let's dive into just regular Q&A, and talk about. I still have a whole bunch of battery left on my camera, so we'll go until that is done. So yeah, any questions you guys have just in general, not about the Thieaudio Monarch Mark II, feel free to yeah, ask, and I'll try and answer them. So let's get going. Um, how bad is it compared to the Earphone Free Pro Olive Edition? Oh God, that's funny. What's funny to me is, like, there's a lot of folks who I don't want to begrudge anybody focusing on frequency response for the benefits of, like, say that's the most important thing to them. That's great, but like, the one of the funny things that I saw was like people saying, "Oh yeah, this sounds better than my, you know, whatever it was." They had some $1,000 thing that was like a Focal Clear or something like that. And I just think, like, what, in what world does that sound? Does the Earphone Free Pro sound better than the Clear? No. um, but I mean, at a whatever the price is, $50 or whatever. Yeah, it's great. I think it's awesome. It's just it's a yeah, it's a super low detail. IEM, just like everything. It's $50. I can't think of anything that's like got all that good technical performance under. I don't know, actually. So the thing that kind of bucks that trend a little bit for me is this where is it? There's a 7 hertz timeless right here. This thing is, oops, sorry. This is not that cheap. It's 200 and something, but this is really really good. Like, I'll do maybe another live impressions of the 7 hertz timeless. But that shocked me. Oh, I see your thoughts on 7 hertz timeless. Well, that's timely. Get it? Um, my thoughts are, okay. I'll just give you like a brief kind of overview now. Maybe I'll do a separate live stream on that. But I think it has. Okay, I'm not going to say that that's the best IEM to get at around $200, but it is definitely in that conversation. Like, it's one of the ones that you should consider if you're looking at around that price. It's certainly the best planar IEM without EQ that I've heard. Period. Like, full stop. There are, so the strength is its tuning, and it has really good, like, I don't know what you call that, like that planar tightness quality to it. Yes, it has that, but it also has a very strong and noticeable planar magnetic timbre, and somebody is gonna cringe at that. But if you know what I'm talking about when I say planar magnetic timbre, and if you're bothered by that, then that is like a really strong example of it. So personally, I'd say that's the only major drawback there. But when you compare that to like the Moondrop Kato, which I think is that's the comparison to make, you can really tell that difference. And the frequency response of the timeless, it's like this kind of weird like warm bright thing. Like, it's got a little bit of thickness there in the bass. It's like the sub bass is not distinct enough, even though it's good. Like, and it doesn't slam that hard either, but it's like strong, I guess, strong bass. Just not like not punchy, right? And comparing that to some of the like the KXXS and all that stuff from Moondrop, like, those ones are a little more punchy. But, and then also there's some slight treble, mid treble forwardness on the timeless as well. So I call it kind of like a warm bright, because it doesn't have that distinct sub bass shelf. A little on the warmer side there, for the bass and the lower mids, and then that little forward treble. But really nice balance, in general. And that, like, not offensive at all, really. Both EQ'd. Elegia versus Aeon 2 closed. Oh, do you want punch and slam, like macro contrast? Although Elegia is kind of low on the bass. Probably Aeon 2 closed. I think the main downside with those Aeons, and like this as well, is that they really do not have much going on for macro contrast and dynamics. But if you don't care about that, so less, I'm not talking about these ones, but the Aeon 2s and the Aeon Noir and that kind of stuff. The detail's very, very good on those. The one thing with Aeon 2 though, if you just get the perforated pads, it dramatically improves the frequency response there. Like, I would not recommend the Aeon 2 with the default pads now that the perforated ones exist. So keep that in mind. So yeah, I would say Aeon 2 or like Aeon 2 Noir, because that comes with the default perforated pads. Really solid. Let's see. Last time you said the Momentum 3's ANC headphones. So you said Momentum 3's 4 ANC headphones. So sorry, I gotta ask again, but I don't want to blow $300 and be like, oh, that one was better. So should I go for XM4s or PXC 550 Mark IIs? No, Momentum 3's. Like, PXC 550 Mark II is like a little more analytic, a little brighter. XM4s have the most bonkers frequency response. I don't recommend that one. Unless you really want to, mess with the EQ settings there, which is, I mean, it helps, but it still doesn't get it as good as the PXC 552 or the Momentum 3. But I would just pick Momentum 3. It's more comfortable than the 552. And the only thing, like, if you wear glasses, the Momentum 3 can be a little much for long plane rides. Like, I was comparing that with the Bose 700, and I found the Bose 700 was more comfortable for the longer plane rides. And also, but maybe that's because I was wearing a mask as well, and with glasses and stuff like that. It's annoying. I needed to reduce 4 dB of the treble and bass shelves to enjoy all of this new EQ. I haven't tried the new EQ. I should do that. I mean, to be clear, I think it's great that he's doing that, right? Like, more people need to be, like, the more people are sort of that care about frequency response, that are involved in that kind of stuff, the better, in my opinion. But it's like when people aren't able to, like, I definitely know that there's a lot of people who index really heavily for tonal balance, and I just think, like, that's great, but if you just, like, listen to stuff, if you imagine you're coming at this stuff cold without any sense of anything, I think that both tonal balance and technical performance are important considerations for the overall experience. I lean way more on the tonal balance side of things because I think that's so much more important especially when it's wrong. Like, when it's bad, it's, like, really bad. But there are many different ways that it can be good, in my opinion. And part of that is because if you are, I mean, that's a deep subject that gets into the question about, should you try and listen as artists intended, or should it just be pleasant sounding? And I lean towards, if it sounds good, you've done something. There's something there that is correct, right? And there can be many different versions of that. And just like that, as Blaine said from one of the previous live streams, there's many different ways that things can be wrong too. But yeah, so for me, it's like the tonal balance aspect is key. But as long as it's within a ballpark and it's generally balanced for fundamental and harmonic, then there's a pretty noticeable difference as far as the technical qualities are concerned. And I do worry that there's a lot of folks out there who are just, like, indexing so hard for the things that they can measure that they're ignoring or not noticing or not listening hard enough for these other qualities that do exist. And what folks like Kryn and Antdroid and myself and a number of other reviewers, Metal of course, when we're listening to this stuff, I don't think we're, like, I don't know. I tend to think it's a little bit more of a balanced approach because it includes stuff that we can't find in the graph. Um, and yeah, I just think that's a more complete picture. Let's see. I can't stand timeless because of the weird imaging. It's also a bit sibilant. Good resolution and general tonality, though. I take the Kato over it personally. Um, I don't mind the imaging. I mean, I agree that the imaging is one of the weirder things about it, but I don't mind it that much. Um, but yeah, I can see that. I can see a preference for the Kato. Yeah. Are you a stealth magnet or the old ones? I like the stealth magnet better because it balances out the treble harmonics a little bit more with the upper treble. It's still a little bright, but like in the ear gain region. But like it to me, it demonstrates that like level is a matter of preference for ear gain. Balance for harmonics is not. Like balance for harmonics is like more or matters more, I guess, than like. Yeah, some people are gonna be like, yeah, I want less. Some people are gonna be like, I want more, but if you have situations where you have some harmonics that are like boosted over others, that's going to be more offensive regardless of what the overall level is at least in my opinion. I know Metal disagrees. uh, let's see. But just to be clear, if you already own an RUV2, don't like it doesn't make sense to go to the RUV3. They're so similar, right? Like it's a difference that I don't think matters that much. I can't take the Momentum 3s because they use real sheepskin. Hmm. See, for me though, um, I specifically enjoy listening to the Momentum 3s while eating, delicious lamb dinner. Um, because then it's I feel like you might as well. Bose 700 is actually okay. I never tried those, or M3 or XM4, and now the QC45s. QC45s are no, 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 no. There are. So I'm not going to say that it's a tuning that I hate more than most other tunings, but as far as like most consumer tunings are concerned, I hate it more than most other things. So it's definitely not as bad as like the Sony WH-1000 XM4's default frequency response, but I would like after EQing that one, I would still take the XM4 over the Bose 45s. The Bose 45s, I low key hate that tuning. Like it's just wrong. Uh, the Bose 700s, on the other hand, as much as they have their own issues, like there's the treble is like, all right, so it has ear gain, but then there's like this weird hole in the lower treble. Um, yeah, it's also not ideal, but it's so much better than the 45s. So for me, and I'll put together a little bit of a, I don't know, maybe we'll do a video on this, but for me, the best noise canceling headphones right now at the top is the Momentum 3 for sound quality. Right after that is the, okay, it's unfortunate, but right after that is actually the Razer Opus, but it has that hissing thing in the background that like and this sort of like weird electronic burp, like it's not a burble, it's more like electronic whine sound. It's yeah, so that is a bit of a deal breaker for me. But as far as the tuning is concerned, it's really good. So it's a bit of a shame. But then after that is the AKG N700 NC Mark II. Really good tuning on that one. It's just that the ANC aspect isn't that great. And the technical performance is like it's a cheap headphone. And then after that is the Bose 700. So and mainly not because it's particularly great in any one particular aspect. It's just that it's comfortable. It's got a reasonable frequency response, just with some quirks there in the treble. It's reasonable for its technical performance, but they all kind of suck there. Like they're all not great for sound quality in general. The only one, again, oh, sorry, the PXE 550 Mark II, I should probably put ahead of that one. Yeah. But yeah, the only ones that are actually good for their technical performance are the Sennheiser Momentum 3 and PXE 550 Mark II, as far as detail is concerned. So I share Crin's view on the Momentum 3 there, but the Momentum 3, its frequency response is also weird. Like, its general balance is good, but there are some harmonic quirks and imbalances there that when I first heard it, I was like, how is this okay? And then I actually think that the pads, because they're very thick pads, I think the pad compression kind of helped alleviate some of that. So I don't think it was brain burning on that, because I actually measured them as well. So I'll need to go back and measure again, because it doesn't sound as weird to me anymore. Chew Wafers, what will it take for you to get a Verite closed in for review? Sometimes I feel like buying one just to send it. Don't do that. Like, spend money on things that you actually get to enjoy. No, I should probably reach out to Zach again. I just haven't had the opportunity. There's just so much stuff coming through that, and so much work to be done, that it's difficult to, because I feel like it'd be something I'd have to kind of like schedule around a little bit. So maybe I'll get someone to send one in for review. But Krona did a review on the channel, and I know we're different people and we have sometimes different opinions, but I do trust his takes as far as like his analysis of tonal balance. So yeah. And I have heard the Verite closed. It's just, yeah. I don't know. I probably just want to borrow it from somebody, but don't like spend money on things that you like. If you want to buy that headphone and you enjoy and you're like, yeah, this is for me, go ahead. But don't do it just to send it in for review. Let's see. Back to the Monarch Mark II. Would you recommend to EQ to deal with a 5K peak? No, I don't think it's significant enough. Where again, it's not really a peak. It's a little bit of a bump, more of a forwardness. And it's not something I EQ. So like the only effect that it has is like, for me at least, is cymbals take on a bit of a kind of a like percussive hits and cymbals and stuff. They take on a bit of like a unique character to them, which is fine. It's not like it causes that sort of compression quality that I worry about, because it's still reasonably balanced with the harmonics, like, or the frequencies that are around it. Ratings just has posted an NC 700 Mark II graph. Looks a bit shouty again. Yeah, I don't know what they're doing. The one that I measured, at least the one that's in the studio right now, is one of the best tonal balances you could find. So could be a unit variation thing too. AirPods Max, like, I know some people like that headphone, but like for me, that's not a good sounding. Like, that's a headphone where I listen to it and I keep wanting to lean forward because of the weird, like, there's no clarity for the upper mids, and it's made worse by like a bump that's at kind of right in the mids, and so it causes this kind of congested sound for the mid range. It just doesn't work for me. Just buy Olive's the best headphones ever Anchor Soundcore. I bet they sound good. I'm curious to get those in and use his profile, because I bet they sound good. If people are like really meticulous about like tuning and stuff like that, you're going to end up with something that has at least a good tonal balance, and that counts for a lot. That counts for, okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to like say, give a percentage that's like consistent for this, but for me, I would say tonal balance counts for at least 80%. And that's like, okay, let's say like if you're gonna say you're allowed to EQ, then it goes down a little bit, but it still counts for a lot, because I'd rather not I'd rather, if I'm gonna EQ, I'd rather make it like 2 or 3 filters at most with wide Q values. I'd rather not get into the fine-grained EQ stuff, even though, like, sure, it helps with things, but I'd rather not. heard the AirPods Max are what most audiophiles use when nobody's watching. Maybe the AirPods Pro. I can see that. Liberty 3 Pro. Okay, I'll need to check that one out. Let's see. Do you think Odyssey will release it? Do you think Odyssey will release a new flagship closeback like LCD 5C? It's not something that I'd expect, but I don't know. I don't have any inside information on that, but it's not something that I would outright, expect at this point. Just because I imagine that they probably have other headphones that they want to release first. But maybe, who knows? It's hard to do planar closebacks. I have not tried the Tamshin Hana. I've got the Tamshin Darling here somewhere. Very interesting, that one. It's too shouty for sure, but when you use the final E tips, it definitely helps. Three-part review on the Peacock and $1,000 headphones is a much must watch. Okay, I'll check that out, but I'm not that optimistic. The Peacock is Oh, looks like the camera's overheating here again. That's a normal thing now. You mentioned that you were reviewing the Aeon X Open and Closed a while back. What are your thoughts on both? Yeah, so the video is all done. It should drop like either tomorrow or Monday. I just have to do some B-roll and thumbnail. My thoughts are, I don't see a reason to go for the Open because the Sundara exists. But if you're looking for that warmer kind of like, I don't know, thicker sound, then sure. But for me, the one that actually is worth getting over other headphones, like just like if you're gonna get a closeback headphone, it is the closeback one, because it's probably the best tuned closeback headphone. It's one of the best tuned closeback headphones that I've ever come across, period, even though the technical performance isn't great. So it's a little on the blunted side there for the detail. It doesn't have anything going on for the dynamics. It's probably one of the more compressed sounding planars that I've heard, if not the most compressed sounding one. Maybe not the most. I think the Drop Panda's up there, but these are fairly on the compressed side. But at the same time, it's like the all the planar separation and layering and depth and all that stuff is in control, is all still there. So you're basically getting that really fast, tight, well separated, well controlled sounding headphone with an amazing frequency response. And so it's like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to recommend that. That sounds, like, especially at the price, right? Like, I don't think there's anything that has a tuning quite like this. For closeback specifically, right? So yeah, I would take this over just about any other closeback at that price point. The only other one that's on my radar there is the EMU Teak, and I need to get one of those in and check that out. But yeah, like it's funny. Like so for me, the K371 is still the closeback that has the best value by far, because it's so cheap, right? And you get really good sound quality out of the K371. But if you really want that planar sound, then I do think it is worth going up to this one. And so the other ones that are kind of like in between there's the Bear Dynamic DT700, which I also have a review coming out soon, and the tuning there is quite good. I would probably still take this over the DT700, even though they're in slightly different price brackets. And then the other is the the EMU Teak, which I need to just see if I can get my hands on one. Someone should send Philphone to add your measurements. Yeah, actually, we're gonna do that at some point. I think he's still working on making some, and then he's gonna send one over. Let's see. I heard it at CanJam. It was good. I liked it. Couple more here. Couple more. We're not in the red yet on my camera's overheating. Sounds like the new tuning is probably at least partially due to this parallel uniforce trace pattern. So so that'd have to be a redesign. Yeah, I think so. I haven't heard the Mest Mark II, so I can't do that comparison. You should tape 75% of each bass port on the AirPods Max. Oh, interesting. AirPods Pro are favorite IEMs when factoring in convenience. Yep, they're solid. Just wait a couple days and the Aeon X stuff is going to come out. But in general, I like them. I like the closed more. If I'm picking between the two, the closed makes sense to me. The open less so. Would you rather have DCA Noir or LCD XC 2021? All right, so LCD XC 2021 is more technically impressive than the Noir, but the Noir is way more comfortable. And the Noir doesn't really, it's not something you really need to EQ on the Noir. So I'd say the frequency response is a little better on the Noir. But with EQ, LCD XC is very, very impressive. Yeah. Again, the big thing with the LCD XC is can you handle the weight, right? Because they're not light. They're right here. They're big, heavy boys. Well, I'm not. They're on the stand. If you can handle the weight, okay, then you move to the next question. Are you willing to EQ? And if you are, if it's yes to both of those, then LCD XC. If it's no to either of them, go to the Noir or the Radiance or something else, basically. Yeah. Oh yeah, Philphone. Yeah, Philphone is. We'll figure something out there, but that's an open back. So we're talking about I was talking about closed backs earlier. You'd love to know top 3 reviewers? Are you asking me this? Top 3 reviewers. Okay, so Chrono and Precog and Grover. No, I should if I'm gonna exclude the guys who do reviews on the channel, right? Because that's not fair. All right, so obviously I'm friends with Kryn, and we have him on the channel all the time, so he's got to be in that list. I wouldn't say this is in any particular order, but Kryn for sure. Metal 571 for sure, but I'm not sure if he counts because he's retired. I was actually Blaine and I were going to see if we wanted to do another live stream today, and I said no because I was originally going to do this live stream earlier in the week. It's just that other stuff kept piling up, so I had to get that stuff done. And I thought, well, it's Thanksgiving weekend, let's let everybody chill with their family. But Metal's here anyways, so we could have. Yeah, so Metal's in there, Kryn's in there, and who was the third? Who was the third? All right, it's gonna be DMS for the third. DMS, we don't always agree. We have some different opinions on stuff. I think that's normal, right? I mean, even Crit and I will disagree too, and Mel and I do too, right? So even though we're friends, we talk regularly, and we often align as far as preferences are concerned. DMS, he is someone who takes audio very seriously. He's one of the reviewers who really does, like, you can tell this is his passion, right? And yeah, so and that really comes through, and I like that about his videos. So yeah, he's my third pick there. I don't know, am I missing somebody? I feel like there's lots of great reviewers too, though, right? Like, it's like I like Super, I like who else? Android, of course, right? Like, how could I exclude Android? So, having three, like, if you're saying YouTube reviewers, yeah, okay, DMS for sure. But yeah, Android is like also like the top of that list. Yeah, I don't. It's difficult because, yeah, there's a lot of guys who are doing great stuff. Oh yeah, there's really old cob, Jake Cherif. Oh, sorry, did I just dox you? Well, it was your Medium site anyways. So. Yeah, Jake's a music producer who's been writing for us. So check out his articles. Actually, I need to publish some of the new ones. I saw your Variations review, and it was very good. Um, hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. Max does reviews. Max Settings does reviews as well. Yeah, like there's a lot of reviewers. It's difficult to pick three. There's a lot of folks who I like, and whose videos I will, if I have an opportunity, to watch, I will watch. But a lot of it's difficult because it's like you could spend all day just watching different people's takes on things, and then never get anything done. So oftentimes it's like, I have to limit myself. How much better is the Radiance closed than Celeste? It's not about better at that point. It's just a little different. So Radiance is not as tight sounding. I also think it's not as clear of a frequency response. It's a little warmer, but if you want that bass, the Radiance. Also, Radiance I found to be more comfortable. So I think it's solid as well. Which reviewers don't you like? Okay, now we're getting into the spicy stuff. I There are. I think you guys can guess which ones I'm not a huge. Oh, hey, Michael's in the chat as well. Yeah, Michael's. He's got a channel. Check his channel out. um, Michael DeLazar. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. I'm sorry. um, but yeah, reviewers who I don't like. I think you guys know the ones that I'm a little bit at odds with, and it's typically because I will come out with the video shortly after they do and say the complete opposite. But that doesn't mean that I don't like them as people. It's just that I don't have the same experience with the thing, or I don't have I think they're wrong about a given product, right? So that's on the one hand. The other is there's definitely folks who will try and they'll review things without having heard them, right? So they'll look at a frequency response graph and go, oh yeah, here's how this sounds. They'll try and do an analysis of a headphone say, objectively this is what it sounds like because here's how it measures. They'll never, without ever having heard it. And no, I'm not even talking about like ASR. Like ASR, like that's a totally different thing. They actually, the guy actually does listen to the headphones after he measures, which is crazy. You should probably listen before, but he does listen, right? So I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about like the folks who will read a frequency response graph and they'll try and do an analysis and without ever having heard it and tell you whether or not it's good. Like you can probably do that in cases where something is like really egregious, like just totally messed up. Sure, then okay, this is going to sound bad, right? But like in so many cases, things are in close enough, like they're reasonable enough, and they're making judgments about things that are just wrong. Like they'll talk about, like not, for example, not understanding that on the anthropometric pinna you need to have a 9K dip, right? Stuff like that. Like you can, it's understandable that maybe this is a misunderstanding. Like it's understandable that this information wouldn't be available to them because they're not listening to them, but that's why you have to. Not just there's multiple people who are doing this. There's people who like will produce like hour-long videos of just analyzing frequency response without ever having heard it. I just think, like, what are you doing? So yeah. Z is a blast to hang out with, but I categorically disagree with most of his reviews. I bet that's how I would take it as well, right? It's like, I don't think he's doing the same thing that other reviewers are doing. He's doing his own thing, and that's fine. But as far as like for information, no, I would not. I personally wouldn't, look to him for information. But yeah, I want to make it clear that I don't. It's not that I dislike him as a person. I think he's probably a ton of fun, and I bet that it would be a lot of fun to hang out with him. So I bet we get along. Some people liking things that are generally disliked just to be different. I see. Yeah. So there's the clout seeking, right? Where it's like, or let's be a contrarian to try and get attention. There's stuff like that. Yeah. Everybody likes this. They're wrong. There's a lot of that out there. Yeah. And it's funny because it's effective, right? Like you see, there are situations where somebody said something that's just so bonkers wrong, and because it's contrarian and is expressed with authority, you see people believing these things and then following what they're saying and thinking, oh yeah, this is like, the way it is. And I feel bad for them because they've been misled. And it's not their fault. It's like this, there's situations where like you just can't necessarily know. And a lot of that is just because this is a really deep subject that's very difficult. Like imagine coming at this cold. You didn't know anything about frequency response or anything like that. And then you see one of those videos, stuff that looks compelling, it can be very misleading. And so that's why I actually really enjoyed the video on measurements as consumer content. That I feel like not enough people have watched that video because that's hilarious. But yeah. Oh God, like defending MQA but not naming names here. You can name names. I don't care. we're in a live stream environment here. The spicy takes are fine. I'm just kidding. I feel like I'm like hunched over because I'm trying to lean in so that the focus is on me and not this thing. You guys are naming people who I actually don't know who they are. So, but I'm just saying there are people like that who do that kind of stuff, and I'm not a fan. And no, I'm not like the ASR guy is at the very least listens to the headphones. So, I mean, he's also done things incorrectly. He's made mistakes in his measurements, but like, it's not the mistake that I think is the issue there. It's the attitude after the mistake has been pointed out, because everybody makes mistakes. Like, it's very easy to make mistakes with this stuff. Earlier on, like, I've made mistakes as well, right? But it's not about that. It's about what the attitude is after it's been pointed out. And when people like Crin or Android or when people who are like, have a lot of experience with this stuff and really understand it deeply are trying to be helpful and pointing this stuff out, and then still doubling down and saying things like pads don't make a difference and whatever. I you know I have more of an issue with that, like the attitude, less an issue with the the fact that sometimes it's done wrong, because you can make mistakes with this, and we're all still learning. That's the thing. And I think it's important to have that attitude, the attitude that we're all still learning. So yeah, just to be clear, I'm not talking about ASR when I'm saying these folks who are just looking at measurements, because yeah, he does listen. What do I think of Olive? I've had generally pleasant interactions with Olive. Like someone was saying about like his interactions with YouTube comments can be a bit spicy, but I haven't personally had that interaction. Olive and I talk behind the scenes a bunch still. Unfortunately, still can't convince him that FR isn't everything. So I think he's an example of someone who indexes really hard for tonal balance, and that's fine. Like some people, it's like when you put like high-end headphones on someone who's not into the hobby, and they're just like, it sounds like headphones to me, right? Like they're not. I'd say you put a HD800S on them, and then you put like M50X, and they're like, it sounds like headphones. Like there are people who just they're not paying attention to some of these qualities, and they're only paying attention to the tonal balance and frequency response, which is totally fine. And I think Olive is one of these people who's much more focused on tonal balance, or he's exclusively focused on tonal balance, because that matters the most to him. And so I think that's perfectly fine. Like, earlier when I said like maybe my index is like 80% tonal balance and 20% technical performance or something like that, I think his is like 99.9% tonal balance, right? But like if as an example, if somebody can't hear the difference between a Focal Alex and a Utopia, you know what I mean? Like that's, to me, that's like, okay, I just feel bad, because it's like that there's very obviously a difference between the two as far as detail and stuff like that's concerned. And it's not to begrudge him, right? Like if he's just indexing for tonal balance, right, he's not going to notice those things. I think the bigger question is like, how do we square this with the people who are doing both? Because this is one of the problems that I think we deal with. There's so many confounding variables, like for example price. People, if something costs more, we're bound to think that it's going to sound better, and that's not necessarily the case. So that's why, like, sometimes I think doing some blind listening can really help reveal a lot of that stuff. And it's not like us who are giving subjective accounts as well are immune from making. I'd say we're more prone to making mistakes about that kind of stuff, because there isn't anything to back that up, right? The one thing I will say with Olive, is that I think I do have some concerns about what is going on with the measurements that he's doing. Like, I don't like the sound demos. I think that's nonsense. I've basically stated before that that's, you're not actually going to get an accurate representation of the headphone by listening to a sound demo, even in the best cases, because of compounding effects and because of coupling differences. So even if you are wearing the reference headphone, you're not going to get an accurate representation. Comparatively, there's value, but I think people will immediately go, yeah, that's what that sounds like, and I worry about that. But beyond that, I think that like, so for example, the Stealth, the DCA Stealth, I found it wasn't as perfect in the frequency response as ASR was indicating, but and I also found the same thing that Olive did with the different positioning and stuff like that, where like it would be a little shouty in the most common position, but then if I moved it kind of like to the back where my ear touched the back, it was a lot more normal. But at no point is there like to suggest that there's a 9 kilohertz peak on that headphone. It might be there for him, okay? I haven't seen a single measurement that shows it. Jude's doesn't show it, mine doesn't show it, Amir's doesn't show it, and I don't hear it either. And so he's the only one who's indicated this, and I think that could be just because he has an ear canal such that, or he has a concha specifically, because that's where that is. He's got a concha such that it maybe it amplifies there. And as I'm frequently reminded, you know, that whole region, like in the treble, it's a nightmare. Like the effects of the ear on basically everything above 5K is just like crazy. So it's totally possible that he could hear it that way. I'm not saying, you know, that he's wrong or anything like that. I don't think he is. I think, you know, he's probably very in tune with where different peaks are. It's just that I don't hear it that way, and the measurements also don't show that. So I don't question his hearing. No, I just think that he's got a ear canal or a concha, or, you know, certain features of his ear that are, you know, maybe a little bit different from the average. Or, well, I mean, we could expect it to be different from the average, but like different enough to where he hears a 9K peak that just isn't there for most other people. Oh god, DankPod sound demos. Yeah. I such a hard time with sound demos because of the fact that we are so much more experientially oriented. Like, you can spend a lot of time learning stuff, but if someone just like shows you a thing, that's going to be so much more compelling. The problem is that when they show you a thing and it's wrong, you're bound to draw wrong, you know, conclusions that are wrong as well. And so I think I think sound demos for headphones are damaging to, you know, public consciousness about given products. But I do also think that the best examples of that are olives. Yeah, I think those are the ones that are like, if you approach it from a place of nuance and understanding that these have comparative value and they're not meant to be accurate representations of the thing, then I think that's actually fine. Like, I don't have that many issues. Just keep in mind that you're using his ears, which may not be yours. So you're getting a representation of how it sounds to him, not necessarily how it's going to sound to you, in the best of cases. And I think that that's still going to be like a very small fraction of people who are actually engaging with the sound demos. That's my concern. It's more like a matter of pragmatism and practicality than it is, you know, anything to do with oh, there we go, internal temperature is too high. That is anything to do with like something being, you know, right or wrong. Let me just open this up while my camera cools off. That was a rant. Okay, let's do a few more questions here, guys, and then we'll call it. It's pretty annoying that this camera shuts off like that, but it's an hour and 45 minutes. Lost a lot of respect for ASR after he refused to correct that stupid 599 SE review. No, pads don't affect the sound at all. It's just that SE sounds different, guys. Yeah, no. I mean, thankfully, people are realizing that there's a lot of craziness there, and they're not. I do feel like, you know, in the larger context, the public consciousness has sort of recognized that. So at least I hope. But yeah, to me, it's I don't care that he made the mistake about that. I think the bigger issue is that there's no interest in correcting the mistake. There's no interest in admitting, oh yeah, I got this wrong. I should, you know, change that, because it undermines authority, I guess, right? I think that's probably the reason why. But from my perspective, I'd rather not be wrong any longer than I am, right? So if something is pointed out that's incorrect, I'd love to, you know, change the or like take the video down or something like that, or like change the, you know, indicate that, oh, this was incorrect and here's the corrected thing, right? No, sorry, we're talking about all of his gadgets on YouTube. Not right now. No, I was talking about the Emir thing. But Olive's gadgets, I have I have yeah, respect for what he's doing. I just don't like the sound demos aspect. um, Corinne did a demo between 8XX and 800S. That is how it is done. Just relative. Yeah, just a relative. Like if you're, that is the most information that you could get from a sound demo is the relative differences between things. And my problem is more that that's not always understood. Even though I if you watch his videos, he you know talks about the ways to understand this stuff. I just don't. I expect most people aren't going to do that. Sound demos should not be a thing ever. Yeah, I agree. It's funny because I thought about doing them on the channel. I wanted to do that because it is so compelling, but I think people are just going to draw the wrong conclusions. I had the same worries about. I've said this multiple times. I have the same worries about frequency response graphs where when you I mean you can end up with these same quantitative fallacies that people are making all the time on ASR about sound quality. Um, if you just focus on the measurements, it's and then you end up with these folks who are analyzing stuff, reviewing headphones without ever having heard them. It's just like no. All right, we're back. I still have 18% battery left, so um now see, you say they only give some tonality. They give a compounded tonality for a particular coupling that isn't yours, so they don't actually give an accurate representation of the tonal balance. Also, the reference point is different, but that's okay. I mean, if you're looking at the graphs that are taken on a person's head, the reference point is going to be different from an eardrum reference point taken on a Gross, so you can't compare those. How do you feel about Crin's amazing YouTube success? I'm in love with his vids. Yeah, I've been saying it for a long time. His before he started taking it more seriously, like YouTube, I think people needed to watch more of his vids because they were always hilarious. I love them. But as far as like his success is concerned, I think it's. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but like, he's had a pretty large following even before he did YouTube, right? So, to me, it's like that those two are related, and it's like, I mean, you see the subscriber growth there, and I think that a lot of that's just like, yeah, people should be subscribing anyways, right? So, so yeah, that's why, like, for me, like someone was asking earlier, like, who are my favorites? Like, if we're talking YouTube reviewers, Crin's got to be on that list. I watch every one of his videos. It's amazing. Yeah. I'm see, the thing about Crin's success is that it makes my job easier. Because I mean, I was saying this before, but how YouTube did the whole like getting rid of the dislike bar, and that is so frustrating to me. Right? When those types of decisions get made, it's like now there's so much more confusion, right? In this, I mean, we're in a fairly niche hobby, but like now it basically opens the door to madness. What I love about Crin's channel and its growth and seeing its growth is that this is a pathway through the madness. That this is a way, like, yeah, we don't always align on everything, but like he's someone who's actively doing good by cutting through the madness, and so to see more people paying attention to that is nothing but a good thing. And it also helps for me because I can he and I analyze stuff in similar fashion, and it helps for me because I'm able to say, look, like, it's basically corroborating evidence that I'm not the only one who's saying what I'm saying about a given thing, about tonal balance and technical performance, right? I can point to, even in times when we do disagree, I can point to Crin's analysis of a thing, which is really helpful to have. And he's entertaining. He's hilarious. Yeah, yeah. The one thing that I think would be like a bit difficult for him. Like he's definitely made a career out of. I mean, he said this himself that he's made a career out of first impressions, and that makes it somewhat difficult to go into like a lot of depth about something, which means that I mean I think it's actually going to work in his favor as far as the appeal is concerned. But if anybody's looking for those more in-depth kind of things, he does do articles. It's just that, I think that it's difficult to do that on a YouTube platform on a consistent basis. So I hope that the YouTube stuff doesn't take away from his in-depth articles as well. I miss Crin's writing since he went to YouTube. He posts little so there were his snapshot posts that he did, but then also he did some really amazing in-depth articles, and I hope he continues those. Yeah, because for me that's always more interesting than the snapshot stuff. Will you review them as a lyric anytime soon? I want to see how it compares to the DCA Stealth. Yeah, I will once Chrono sends it over. Let's see. We seem to need the world's largest disclaimers, no matter whether it's a sound demo or graphs. I know. I feel like I could spend 20 minutes in a video, just the entire video, giving disclaimers on, you know what I mean, like, and never actually get to talking about the thing. This is difficult, and actually I'm considering kind of revising an approach for this coming year, to instead of focusing on the same structure that I've been doing, maybe shift it to be a little bit more bite-sized and be more of a, like, here are like the 5 things you need to know about a given product, and just launch into it that way, because otherwise you end up kind of just in this constant, like, a disclaimer explanation mode that it can be a little bit long-winded. So I'll have to think about that and figure out how to do that. Do we have enough time to begin discussing / fighting over cables making a tonality change? Sure. I don't think they do. At least I haven't experienced that, right? If you have, great. Has that thing you couldn't talk about happened, or can you still not talk about it? I'm not sure what you mean. It's all subjective. Tastes vary person to person, and no one should be tied down to one person's opinion. So I agree with the latter portion of that, but I'm going to actually say that it's all objective. It's just that that doesn't necessarily capture what's going on in our heads. So, like, I try to frame it this way. First, let's just recognize that we all have ears generally, and because of that, it can't be merely subjective, right? But beyond that, if you're an externalist, meaning that if you're a kind of externalist, meaning that if you think that your conscious experiences depend upon facts external to them, then of course it's all objective. It's just that we engage with that in a different way, right? It's like, it says nothing about how you want your music to sound. No one person can give you the complete story. Yeah, so this is what I'm trying to focus on. It's like, and it's difficult because it's like on a platform like this where, like, people are, they're listening to an opinion because they think that opinion is an authority on a subject. That person might be an authority, like myself included, but that doesn't mean that, that doesn't mean that it's not worth also expanding that, to other information sources. I don't like the siloed nature of this stuff. I mean, you see this with, there's the ASR crowd, there's the SBAF crowd, Headphone is less siloed, but you know what I mean, right? Then there's the Crin crowd, there's the Olives Gadgets crowd, and that, to me, it's like, just like, the person armed with information from multiple sources is in a better place than the person who just blindly follows one. Impedance differences might make a difference. Yeah, in those situations, if something is changing impedances, yeah, you could do that. But like also the same thing's true for those impedance adapters, right? Could you recommend a warmer amp almost as powerful as the A90 or powerful enough to drive the Aria? I find the A90 too bright for my tastes. Like you're talking about frequency response? I don't think that. I mean, maybe a tube amp. A tube amp, yeah, would be good. Get yourself a Forge. Those are expensive, but yeah. I think you can actually run the Aria off the amps and sound Kenzie. I think you can. Double check. I would double check with Justin on that. But yeah, I have a hard time recommending solid state sources, guys, because they sound so similar to one another. I'm not gonna say they sound the same, but they sound similar enough. Yeah, I mean, maybe the Rebel amp is a solid choice. What else? A lot of people like the Burson stuff. They say the Burson stuff is warmer, but I can't confirm this because I haven't listened to that. I couldn't listen to the Burson conductor. I mean, I tried the Burson Conductor 3, I think it was called. I think it was. It was the one where the demo unit that they sent had these ridiculous LEDs in it, and the top plate was open, and it was just so bright that I was like, I can't use this thing. But I think that was just like a demo unit. I don't think that was like the way that they normally sell them. But yeah, that's I don't know, something from Burson would probably be the way to go there. I feel the Monarch Mark II is one of the best sounding IEMs I've ever heard. Love it and really love the price. Yeah, I mean it is probably the IEM under $1,000 to beat at this point. I can't think of anything else that I would choose under $1,000. Precog's writing, and yeah, Precog and Chrono both excellent writing. We need free speech on audio review, not like, oh, okay. I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's funny when you go to like events and you meet people in person, and a lot of the stuff that ends up being disagreements online just sort of stops being relevant because you talk to them and it's a different kind of thing. Let's see. Yeah, I have a AB switch as well. I do have plans to use it, but I'm currently waiting on the next version of that. And it's just like mine is just a PCB, so it's not particularly photogenic. But actually I could do that. Yeah, I've been planning on it. It's just that there's so much other stuff going on right now. And the other thing I'm missing is I don't have the right cables. I need a. It's weird. Like it's really difficult to get this in Canada. But I need a single cable that is an XLR cable that is 4-pin to 4-pin, and that just doesn't seem to exist. So once I have that, I can then start doing using the ABX box. What's the warmest amp I've ever heard? I don't think, like, to me, I don't hear amps as having a significant difference as far as tonal balance is concerned. If you want to get the sound to be warmer, get EQ. Just dive into EQ. Just shelf it down. or see if your headphones can. Oh, it's the Aria, right? Yeah, I'm not sure if you'd be able to change anything with impedance matching. But yeah, you could get a tube amp. But even then, like, yeah, I mean, you could get a tube amp that rolls off the treble if you want. But but like when people talk about like, amplifiers are warm, amplifiers are bright, I bet if you measured those amps, they probably would have a perfectly linear frequency response. So to me, the differences, I think, are more that your attention gets drawn to certain parts more than others. I think, like, there's some amps where it's like, oh, this, my attention gets drawn to the treble stuff more, versus, my attention gets drawn to the bass more. Maybe, and then maybe people think that that's, warmer or brighter, but like I don't actually think that the frequency responses are that different in most cases. Yeah, Precog's definitely more critical than Crin on just about everything. He's very picky. um, um, well, I mean, we have a forum. I don't know how big it is, but were a number of folks who used to be on Headphone that ended up going over there. But if you guys are wondering, like where all the graphs are, they're just in forum thread posts right now, and I am planning on getting them up and running in the database soon. But again, it's one of those things where it's just like there's only so much time in the day. Need to hire someone to go through that because I have a huge database. Okay, guys, I think that basically does it for the stream. Thanks to everybody for hanging out, and we're back from France. So look forward to more videos in the near future. The next one should be the Aeons, and either tomorrow or the day after. But yeah, have a good weekend, everybody.